The first snow of the season was not just falling on Boston, it was suffocating it. The elevator in my building, a fifth-floor walk-up that already tested my patience, chose tonight to die. The metal door refused to open. I held Aria close. She was 7 months old and burning up. I tasted panic, metallic and cold. I hit the fire escape. The wind whipped the snow into my face as I descended 5 flights of freezing metal steps. My breath plumed in the air. Aria's small body was limp against my chest. The infrared thermometer I had jammed in my pocket beeped again when we hit the sidewalk. The red numbers flashed. 103.1 degrees Fahrenheit. That sound was not just a beep. It was the siren signaling the end of my carefully constructed life. I burst through the automatic doors of the emergency room, skidding on the sanitized linoleum. The smell of antiseptic and sickness hit me. A familiar wall of institutional despair. I clutched my daughter, a triage nurse, her face etched with exhaustion, looked up from her screen. Her eyes were flat. She asked the question I had rehearsed for. "Where is the child's father?" I looked her straight in the eye, my voice as steady as if I were closing a compliance deal. "He's not in contact." The lie slipped out. Smooth and practiced, I had become an excellent liar. Aria's tiny heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, syncopated rhythm that felt like judgment. We were rushed back. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a merciless, buzzing tune. They were too bright. They exposed everything. A young doctor, his badge reading Dr. Ramirez, approached us. He was kind, which was worse. He spoke calmly, explaining the tests, the urgency. "We need a paternal medical history. Miss Harper, it is critical for treatment." He looked at Aria, now whimpering under the harsh lights. Then he used the word that cut through the sterile air like a shard of ice: meningitis. It landed in the room and shattered the remaining fragments of my composure. "I am Elena Harper. I am 31 years old. I am a compliance lawyer. My entire career is built on identifying risk and mitigating it. I build firewalls. I write the manuals that keep corporations from imploding." Yet here I was, standing in the epicenter of my own personal implosion. I looked at the forms the nurse had handed me, a stack of liability waivers and insurance queries. I clutched the pen. In my old life, I read contracts that moved millions of dollars. Tonight, I was just praying my healthcare deductible was manageable. A little dark humor flickered inside me. Hoping for good insurance is always more practical than hoping for a miracle. And I needed a miracle. My daughter's life depended on it. My coat pocket vibrated. My personal cell phone, I ignored it. It vibrated again, insistent. I fumbled for it, expecting it to be Maya, my friend, checking in, but the screen showed an unknown New York area code. I stepped away from Aria's gurney, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Something made me answer. "Hello?" A crisp, professional voice on the other end. A woman. "Am I speaking with Mr. Vitale?" The name hit me like a physical blow. I said nothing, my throat closed. "Sir, this is St. Agnes Hospital in New York," the woman continued, oblivious to the fact that I was not Mr. Vitale. "Your name was just confirmed and registered as the legal father on the birth certificate of a baby girl, an Aria Harper." My blood turned to slush. I leaned against the beige wall. Matteo Vitale, my ex-husband and the man I had divorced 15 months ago. The man who owned half of New York's logistics and, according to whispers, all of its shadows. The man who had taught me, with painful precision, how to read the lies in the eyes of powerful men. I had learned the lesson too well. I learned to tell my own. I ended the call without speaking another word. My mind was racing, trying to calculate timelines, exposures, risks. Malachi, the hospital paperwork, the state registry, the DNA trace from the prenatal tests I thought were confidential. A bureaucratic error had just become a homing beacon. A different nurse, the one from triage, hurried past me, then stopped. She was holding a chart. She looked flustered. "Miss Harper," she said, her voice dropping. "We just received a call. The child's father. He's on his way." She said it like she was announcing an incoming hurricane, not a relative, a weather event. My stomach plummeted. I knew Mateo. He would not drive from New York to Boston in a snowstorm. He would not wait for traffic. He would move the sky itself. I understood one thing with chilling clarity: no one arrives by helicopter just to ask how you are doing. I walked back to Aria's small bed in the pediatric bay. The monitors beeped their own anxious rhythm. I looked at her small, flushed face, her eyelids fluttering. I put my hand on her chest. Far in the distance, beyond the sound of the city traffic and the hospital hum, I heard it, a faint, pulsing thump, thump, thump of rotor blades. It was a sound I associated with his world, not mine. The sound of power cutting through the night. Boston shivered under the first snow. I held my daughter. I had kept my secret for 15 months. Tonight. The books were finally being balanced. The sound of the rotor blades grew louder, a deep, resonant thumping that vibrated through the glass of the emergency room. It cut through the sterile hum of the monitors and the quiet suffering of the room. It was the sound of inevitability. It was the sound of his world. It pulled me back, 2 years ago, to a day that smelled of old stone and thousands of white lilies. Our wedding. St. Patrick's Cathedral. I remembered the weight of Mateo's hand on mine at the altar. It was heavy, possessive, a promise of absolute protection. He wore a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than my entire legal education. He had promised me the world. I, in my naive ambition, had only asked for his truth. I should have realized then that the world was the easier of the two for him to give. The memory dissolved, replaced by another. 6 months into the marriage, we were at a restaurant in Tribeca, the kind of place where the reservation list was a state secret and the air was thick with assumed importance. Mateo took a call. His expression remained placid, a mask of civilized calm, but the language changed. He slipped from English into a dialect of Italian I never understood. It was not the warm, melodic language his grandmother, Nonna Rosa, used when she taught me to make sauce. This was a different language. It was hard, precise, and cold. It was the language of logistics, the language of problems being solved. When he hung up the phone, he turned back to me, his smile perfectly in place. His eyes, however, were still cold. "Business," he said, reaching for his wine glass. I was a compliance lawyer. I knew that business was just a convenient file folder for all the things you did not want to write down. Our marriage did not die in a single, explosive argument. It suffocated. It died slowly, starved of oxygen. Mateo loved me in the only way he knew how, by building walls around me, brick by brick, secret by secret. He called it protection. He curated my reality, filtering out the harshness of his world. But I am a person who needs truth to breathe. I need to see the exits. I need to know the risks. His protection felt like a beautifully furnished prison. His silence was not a comfort, it was a void. I met Dana Cross at a legal compliance seminar in Manhattan. I was still Elena Vitali then, a name that opened doors and, more often, silenced entire rooms. She was with the FBI. She was sharp, wearing a practical suit that cost a fraction of mine, and she was utterly unimpressed by the name on my badge. We bumped into each other at the coffee station. She read my name tag, her voice perfectly neutral. "Elena Vitali, compliance is a tough field, especially when the lines are gray." She held my gaze, her eyes analytical. "Be careful you do not compliance yourself into a corner you cannot litigate your way out of." It was not advice. It was a warning. A small seed of ice planted in my gut. That seed sprouted 3 months later, a car bomb in Brooklyn. The media called it a construction accident, a stray gas line explosion. It was a Tuesday. I knew Vitali Holdings had a massive logistics depot 3 blocks from that intersection. When Mateo came home that night, hours late, His expensive cashmere overcoat smelled faintly of smoke and chemicals. He kissed me, his lips cold. He said he was held up in meetings. I looked at the man I had married, the man who had promised me the world, and I finally understood. I was not his partner. I was his most valuable hostage, the one he kept safe, not for her own sake, but as collateral. I left 2 weeks after that. I packed one suitcase, took a cab to Penn Station, bought a train ticket to Boston, and never looked back. I did not know I was pregnant. I found that out 6 weeks later, in a free clinic, my world tilting on its axis all over again. Aria, my secret, my anchor, my reason. I called the only person on earth I trusted, Maya Brooks. She's a pediatric nurse, my best friend since college. She is pragmatic, loud, and fiercely loyal. She is everything the Vitale world is not. She found me this apartment. She held my hand while I gave birth. She became my fortress of one. Now, my life is here. An apartment on the 5th floor. The heating is terrible, and the pipes knock. My job is at a small financial firm, reviewing paperwork that is mind-numbing in its absolute legality. The pay is barely enough. The bills pile up on my kitchen counter like pending indictments. I have a dark little joke. I tell myself I swapped a gilded cage for a hamster wheel. I use coffee to replace sleep, and I use debt to replace savings. But it is mine. The air, thin as it is mine to breathe. The truth, however grim, is my own. I had been so careful, for Aria's safety, when she was born. I left the line for father's name on the birth certificate aggressively blank. I filed it myself. I knew the law. Or I thought I did. I underestimated the system. I forgot about the prenatal tests, the genetic screenings I agreed to, desperate to know that this tiny life inside me was healthy. The hospital, following some new public health mandate I had not tracked, had cross-referenced the prenatal DNA data with the birth registry, a bureaucratic error, a statistical anomaly. A tiny thread of data I missed, a red thread that led the entire New York St. Agnes hospital system straight back to Matteo Vitale. Matteo is not just a rich businessman, he's a power broker. Vitale Holdings is the legitimate face, the fleet of trucks and the portfolio of real estate that glitters in the daylight. But the real money, the real power, is gray. It is the influence that stops investigations, moves politicians, and makes problems like car bombs disappear into construction accidents. The helicopter noise is here. It is no longer in the distance. It is directly overhead, a deafening pulse that vibrates in my chest, mimicking Aria's frantic, monitored heartbeat. I look at my daughter, her small body vulnerable under the humming fluorescent lights. I thought I was protecting her by hiding her. But what is safety if it costs you the truth? What is truth if it gets you killed? The ethical questions I used to debate in law school are no longer theoretical. They are here, in the antiseptic air of the emergency room, and they are waiting, just outside the door, for the man I ran from. The thumping overhead was no longer a distant vibration. It was a physical weight, a presence pressing down on the roof of the hospital. The deep, percussive sound of the rotor blades was loud enough to vibrate the glass in the window frames of the emergency room. Then, it stopped. The thumping was replaced by the high, descending whine of turbines spooling down. A moment later, a gust of wind and displaced snow blasted the automatic doors of the emergency entrance, forcing them open. 2 Boston police officers, their faces pink from the cold and etched with confusion, stumbled inside. They looked young. Out of their depth, they were followed by a hospital security guard who was speaking frantically into his shoulder radio. "I do not care who he is," the guard was saying, his voice cracking with agitation. "You cannot land a Sikorsky on the roof. This is a civilian medical facility. This is not a helipad." A man in a dark, perfectly tailored suit I did not recognize stepped past them. He was not Matteo. He was built like a heavyweight boxer, and his eyes were flat and cold. He just looked at the security guard. He did not speak. The security guard stopped talking. Then Matteo Vitali walked in. The snow from outside seemed to follow him, swirling at his heels before the doors hissed shut, cutting off the whine of the turbines. He was wearing a black wool overcoat, custom-made, unbuttoned, revealing a dark suit that was immaculate. He was exactly as I remembered him, and yet he was entirely different. The 15 months we had been apart had not softened him. They had carved new lines of authority around his eyes and mouth. He looked, as he always did, like a man who had never been told to wait. He moved as if the laws of physics, and certainly the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, were merely suggestions he was currently choosing to ignore. The entire emergency room, a place defined by its own controlled chaos, seemed to fall silent, holding its breath. His eyes swept the room once, a comprehensive, dismissive glance that took in the police officers, the medical staff, and the other patients. The glance dismissed them all as irrelevant. Then his eyes landed on me, and then they moved lower, to the small, blanket-wrapped bundle in the pediatric gurney. He walked toward us. He did not rush. His steps were deliberate, measured, eating up the sanitized linoleum floor. He stopped at the foot of Aria's bed. He just looked at her. The world simply stopped. The beeping of the monitors, the distant shouting from another bay, the quiet sobbing of a woman down the hall, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. He just stared at our daughter. He was silent for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. His face, which I had only ever seen as a mask of controlled, strategic calm or, briefly, of calculated anger, was completely undone. It was not just recognition. It was revelation. He looked like a man who had been colorblind his entire life and had just, for the first time, seen the color red. He looked like he was listening to a piece of music he had never heard before, something profound, like a hymn. Finally, slowly, he raised his eyes to mine. The raw, unguarded emotion was gone, shuttered away, replaced by an intensity that burned right through me. His voice was low, a deep rumble that I felt in my chest more than I heard with my ears. "Elena," he said, "you gave my world a heartbeat." It was the most beautiful sentence I had ever heard, and it was the most terrifying. It was a confession of love. It was a declaration of ownership. It was sweet, and it was a profound threat. Before I could find my voice, Dr. Ramirez, the young physician from before, approached. He looked intimidated by the man in the suit, but his professionalism held. He was holding Aria's chart. "Mr. Vitali, I am Dr. Ramirez. Your daughter is extremely sick. We strongly suspect bacterial meningitis. We need to perform a lumbar puncture immediately to confirm the diagnosis and identify the pathogen." Matteo's gaze snapped to him. The strategist was back. "What do you need?" "We need consent for the procedure," Dr. Ramirez said, his eyes flicking to me. "From her? She is the custodial parent." "You have it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but firm. "There is another issue," the doctor continued, his brow furrowing with genuine concern. "Her blood type. We ran it when she came in. It is AB negative. It is incredibly rare. If she needs a transfusion during the procedure, or if her platelets crash from the infection, this hospital's blood bank. We do not have a deep supply. We have almost none." Matteo did not even look at the doctor. He looked directly at me. His eyes searched mine. "Is she AB negative?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Like you," I managed to say. He turned away from me, pulling his phone from the pocket of his overcoat. He did not raise his voice. He spoke into the phone in that same calm, precise, cold Italian I remembered, the language of business. It was not a request. It was a command. He listed the hospital's address. He listed her blood type. He listed the name of the doctor. He listened for a moment, then hung up. He looked back at Dr. Ramirez. "My medical team is en route from New York. They carry a full supply of AB negative. They will be here in 40 minutes. The doctor blinked, his mouth opening slightly in astonishment. 40 minutes, Mr. Vitali. In this storm from New York, how? "They will be here," Mateo stated. It was not a guess. It was a fact, like gravity. I almost smiled, a bitter, dark twitch of my lips. I remembered an old joke Maya and I had, that in New York, the mafia could get you blood faster than you could get a pizza delivered, apparently. It was true. As if the room were not already crowded enough with ghosts and power plays, the automatic doors opened again. This time, it was not a hospital staff. It was a woman in a soaked, practical trench coat. Her dark hair was plastered to her head by the wet snow, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. Dana Cross, from the Federal Bureau Investigation. She walked directly toward the two bewildered Boston police officers, flashed her badge, and said something I could not hear. The officers nodded, looking profoundly relieved to hand this jurisdictional nightmare to someone else. Dinah walked over to us. She ignored Mateo completely, focusing on me. "Miss Harper," she said, her voice crisp and official. "We picked up satellite and radio chatter about an unsanctioned aircraft landing at a civilian medical facility. I am here to assess the security breach." "A security breach," I repeated, my voice flat. We both knew it was a lie. This was not about Federal Aviation Administration violations. This was about him. Dana's eyes met mine. Her gaze was clear, unwavering. She did not have to say it. Her presence here, this fast, was a message. I see this. I am here. You are a lawyer, Elena. You are one of us. Stand on the right side of the line. Mateo finally turned to her. He regarded her with a look of mild, detached curiosity, as if observing a new species of insect. "Agent Cross," he said. He knew her name. Of course he did. He probably knew her blood type, too. "Thank you for your concern. The security breach is my daughter. She is ill. I am here to ensure she receives adequate care. You are welcome to stay, but you are in the way of the medical staff." It was a dismissal, absolute and cold. Dana did not flinch, but she took a small step back, her gaze never leaving me. "I will be right outside." As she turned, my phone buzzed. No, not my phone. It was Mateo's. He was holding his own phone, staring at the screen. A text message had come through. He read it, and for the first time, I saw that mask of absolute control crack. He did not look angry. He looked cold. A lethal, Arctic cold that was far more terrifying than any rage. "What is it?" I asked, a new dread creeping up my spine. He looked at me, his eyes dark. "My phone, the one associated with the hospital call, the one they used to contact me. It just received a message." He did not show it to me. He just spoke the words, translating them. It is in Spanish. It says, "A child is a beautiful key. It opens every treasury." I stopped breathing. It was not just a hospital error. It was a leak. Someone at St. Agnes, or someone here, they had seen him arrive. They knew. They knew about Aria. My secret, the one I had kept for 15 months to keep her safe, was now the very thing that had put a target on her back. She was not just a baby. She was leverage. Mateo's face hardened, the brief moment of paternal awe completely gone, replaced by the man I recognized, the strategist, the capo. "This ends now," he said, his voice a low command. "As soon as she is stable, you are both coming with me. We go to the Westchester compound. You will be safe there. I will have a full security detail. No one will ever touch you. No one will ever touch her." He was offering me the gilded cage again. Protection, walls, secrets. "An absolute safe house," I whispered, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. "That is what you called our apartment in Tribeca." I looked at him, the father of my child, the stranger I was once married to. "I appreciate the offer, Mateo, but I will not move from one prison to another. There is no place in your world that is safe from the truth." His jaw tightened. "The truth? The truth is that she is my daughter, and she is a target. That is the only truth that matters tonight." Mr. Vitale, Miss Harper, Dr. Ramirez was back, his face pale. He was holding a clipboard and a tray. On the tray was a long, terrifyingly thin needle. "We cannot wait any longer. We have to proceed. The private blood supply is on its way, but the infection will not wait. We need to know what we are fighting." He held the clipboard out to me. "I need your signature for the lumbar puncture." I looked at the paper, a list of risks: infection, bleeding, nerve damage, death. I am a lawyer. I read risk waivers for a living. I had never read one that mattered. I took the pen. My hand was shaking so badly I could not form my name. "I cannot," I whispered, the pen slipping from my fingers. Suddenly, Aria's small body, which had been so limp, arched on the gurney. A high-pitched, agonizing wail tore from her throat. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. It was not a cry. It was a scream. That sound was a needle. It pierced the thick, cold ice that had formed around my heart for 15 months. It shattered my pride, my anger, my defenses. It left only the raw, terrified mother. "Do it," I sobbed to the doctor. "Please, just help her." I fumbled for the pen again, my vision blurred by tears. A hand covered mine, large, warm, and impossibly steady, Matteo's hand. He wrapped his fingers around my trembling ones, guiding the pen. He did not say a word. He just held my hand, and together we signed the form. He did not let go. It was the first time he had touched me in 15 months, and in that moment, in the fluorescent glare of the emergency room, surrounded by police and federal agents and the smell of antiseptic, I was not his ex-wife. I was not his hostage. I was just the mother of his child. And I was holding on to him like a woman drowning. The lumbar puncture was a success. The private medical team, arriving with an efficiency that truly did outpace pizza delivery, confirmed the diagnosis: bacterial meningitis. They brought with them the precise, targeted antibiotics and, more importantly, the precious, chilled bags of AB-negative blood. The acute crisis, the blinding white panic of the emergency room, lasted for 36 agonizing hours. For 36 hours, Matteo and I sat in a sterile, private room that he had somehow requisitioned. We did not speak. We just watched the monitors. We watched the steady, rhythmic rise and fall of our daughter's tiny chest. Aria stabilized. The fever broke, not gradually, but like a switch being thrown. Dr. Ramirez, who looked both profoundly relieved and slightly awestruck by the private medical arsenal that had descended on his ward, signed her release papers 5 days later. I never actually agreed to go to Westchester. There was no discussion, there was no negotiation. When Aria was officially cleared for travel, I was simply informed that my Boston apartment had been secured. My lease, I was told, was terminated. My belongings, I was assured, were already packed and in transit, a black armored sport utility vehicle, the kind that looks like it belongs in a presidential motorcade, idled at the hospital's private discharge entrance. Matteo held Aria. She was sleeping peacefully in a new car seat that probably cost more than my first car. He held the vehicle door open for me. It was not a request. It was a transfer of custody, of me, as much as of her. The Westchester compound was not a house. It was a fortress. It sat on 50 acres of dense, old-growth forest, completely invisible from the main road. The perimeter was a 10-foot-high stone wall, topped with wire, and fronted by a black iron gate that looked strong enough to repel a tank assault. The house itself was a sprawling, beautiful stone mansion, but it was beautiful in the way a museum is beautiful. It was cold, impressive, and clearly meant to be observed, not lived in. My bitter joke about the gilded cage was no longer a metaphor. It was simply my new mailing address. Cameras were everywhere. They were discreet, tucked into the ornate cornices of the high ceilings, hidden among the ancient, sprawling oak trees, observing the tennis court and the massive swimming pool, which was already covered for the winter. They were the eyes of God. If God were a deeply paranoid security contractor, I took to calling it the 5-star hotel of my own private anxiety. Aria, however, thrived. The clean air, the absolute quiet, the undivided attention. She recovered with the astonishing resilience of the very young. And Matteo was a revelation. I had expected him to be awkward, proprietary, perhaps distant. He was a man who gave orders. He was not a man I pictured changing diapers. I was wrong. He was meticulous. He learned her schedule within a day. He held her with a confidence that felt innate. He spoke to her, not in the hard, cold Italian of his business, but in the soft, melodic dialect I remembered, the language his grandmother used for lullabies and recipes. He would sit with her on the floor of the massive, sunlit nursery, a room I learned he had built months ago, just in case. He would just watch her for hours, as if he were studying a masterpiece. It was profoundly disarming. It was terrifying. This was not the man I ran from. This was a man I did not know. The cold strategist, the man who moved the sky, was still there. I saw him every time he took a call, his face hardening into that familiar mask of command. But this father, this man was gentle. He was present. My defenses, the high, reinforced walls I had spent 15 months building around my heart, began to feel flimsy. I watched him make her laugh, a small, gurgling sound that echoed in the cavernous, perfectly decorated room, and I felt a dangerous, stupid warmth spreading through my chest. I felt myself softening, and that, more than anything, made me erect the barriers again, higher and stronger this time. Matteo did not hide the threats from me. Not this time. That, perhaps, was the most significant change. He treated me less like a liability and more like a senior consultant. He explained the new landscape over dinner one night. The dining room table was 20 feet long, carved from a single piece of dark wood. We sat at one end, Aria in a new high chair between us. The absurdity was not lost on me. "The message you saw at the hospital?" he said, cutting his steak. He did not look up. It was from Los Reyes. It was a name I knew. I knew it from news reports and FBI bulletins, a cartel, powerful, ruthless, and expanding. "They are not my primary problem," he continued, his voice calm, "but they are opportunistic. They smell blood in the water. They see Aria as a new door, a new way to pressure me." "Pressure you for what?" I asked, my voice flat. "Access, my logistics network. My ships, my trucks, they want to move their product through my legitimate channels. And you said no." He gave me a look that said this was an obvious and stupid question. I do not deal in that product. It is bad for the real business. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. "As opposed to the right kind of attention?" I asked. My sarcasm was a thin shield, but it was the only one I had. "That," he said, placing his fork down, "is the other problem, the commission. La Comisión, the council, the commission, the old guard, the capos of the East Coast families. I had only heard the name whispered before. They are not happy," Matteo said. "They see me as too corporate, too clean, too legitimate. They see my refusal to play by the old rules, their rules, as disrespect. They want me to bend, to lower my flag. As they say, they are using the Los Reyes pressure to leverage their own demands." "So you are being squeezed," I said, the lawyer in me analyzing the power dynamics. "The cartels on one side and the old guard on the other. And a third," he added, sipping his water, "the Manhattan district attorney. He has been trying to build a case against Vitali Holdings for 2 years. He does not care about the gray area. He wants the legitimate assets. He wants the whole thing. He is using the whispers from the commission and the violence from Los Reyes as his excuse. He wants to paint me as a racketeer so he can seize my real estate, my ports, my company. It was a 3-front war, and my daughter and I were now standing squarely in the middle of it. Dana Cross did not visit the compound. She was far too smart for that. She met me in town at a small, crowded coffee shop in Tarrytown. I had been allowed to go, though I was followed by 2 men in a black sport utility vehicle. They sat at a table by the window, sipping espressos and pretending not to watch my every move. "It looks good on you," Dana said, her eyes flicking to the expensive, Matteo-provided coat I was wearing. "It is a rental," I lied. Look, Elena, she said, leaning in. Her voice was low, urgent. You are in a unique position. You are inside. You are a lawyer. You know what is legal and what is not. I am not asking you to wear a wire. I am just asking for harmless observation. Schedules, names, who visits the compound. Help us build the case against Los Reyes. And in exchange, I asked, stirring my coffee. In exchange, when we move, we make sure you and the child are protected. We can offer you a new life. Witness protection. A new life. Another cage. Just one run by the government. No, I said, my voice firm. I am not your informant, Dana. Think about your daughter. She pushed, her eyes hard. I am, I said, standing up. He is her father. I will not be the one to send him to prison. She looked disappointed, but not surprised. That wall you are hiding behind, Elena, it is his. One day he will decide it is not worth protecting you anymore. Call me then. I walked out. The presence of Mateo's men behind me a strange, unwelcome comfort, but I knew she was partly right. I was a compliance lawyer. I believe in documentation. That night, I bought a new, encrypted laptop using a masked credit card. I started my own file. I made notes on every call I overheard, every visitor, every shipment schedule, not for Dana, not for the Federal Bureau investigation, for me, for Aria. It was my own personal insurance policy, my documentation for the bad day I knew was coming. The bad day arrived sooner than I expected. I was walking with Aria in the extensive back gardens, a rare, warm afternoon. I heard a faint, high-pitched buzzing sound. I looked up. A small, dark drone was hovering above the tree line, its camera lens a dark, unblinking eye pointed directly at us. I grabbed Aria, shielded her small body with my own, and ran back to the house, screaming for the guards. Within an hour, the compound was on a full lockdown. Mateo was incandescent with a cold, controlled rage. They are testing the perimeters, he said to his head of security. He doubled the guards, more men, more cameras. He brought in a specialized team with anti-drone technology, strange-looking rifles that fired radio frequencies. My anxiety, which had just begun to settle into a low hum, flared into a full-blown panic. He had upgraded my nightmare. The next day, his cousin arrived, Lorenzo Vitale. I had met him only a few times during my marriage. He was younger than Mateo, handsome in a slick, unsettling way, with a smile that was too wide and eyes that were too narrow. He moved with a restless, snake-like energy. Elena Kugina, he said, kissing the air near both my cheeks. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else I could not place, something sour. And this must be the little princess. He looked at Aria, who was in my arms. His smile was thin. It was a smile like a razor blade, all family, all poison. My friend Maya called me that night, on the secure line Mateo had insisted I use. I heard what happened, she said, her voice tight with worry. I'm so worried, El. I'm fine, Maya, we are fine. He's protecting us. Be careful, honey, she whispered. Remember what I told you. Rare blood attracts rare predators, and sometimes the predators are already inside the house. Lorenzo's thin, sharp smile flashed in my mind. That Sunday was the requisite family dinner. Mateo's grandmother, Nonna Rosa, the matriarch of the Vitale clan, presided over the table. She was a tiny woman in her 80s, draped in expensive black lace, with eyes that had seen everything and forgiven very little. The whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins. Lorenzo sat across from me, his eyes constantly moving, his smile fixed. After the main course, Nonna Rosa, who had been watching me silently throughout the meal, beckoned me over. I leaned in. She smelled of garlic and expensive rosewater. So, Elena, she whispered, her voice like dry parchment. You have come back. You have brought him his child. This is good. She patted my hand. Her skin was thin as paper, but her grip was like steel. Tell me, Kara, she said, looking deep into my eyes. You have lived in the quiet world, and you have lived in our world. Now you are back. What is it you want? Do you want a home, or do you want peace? Because in this life, she squeezed my hand, you rarely get to have both. I looked at Mateo, who was at the other end of the long table, deep in a low, intense conversation with his uncle. Then I looked at Aria, sleeping peacefully in a bassinet nearby, guarded by one of Mateo's men. I had no answer. The next week, Mateo came into the library, which had become my unofficial office. "I need your help," he said. There was no preamble. "Help with what?" "My legitimate business, the logistics arm, the one the district attorney is trying to seize. I need you to be my in-house compliance consultant. I need you to build a firewall, a real one. I need you to go through every contract, every shipping manifest, every holding company. Find the vulnerabilities, fix them, make us bulletproof, legally." He was offering me a job. He was offering me the keys to his kingdom. Not the gray one, but the real one. The one he claimed he wanted to protect. "Why me?" I asked, my suspicion a reflex. "Because you are the best compliance lawyer I know," he said, his voice flat. "And because you are the only person on earth who has more to lose than I do if this fails, I will pay you double your Boston salary." I took the job. For 2 weeks, I lived in a world of paper. I cross-referenced subsidiaries, shipping routes, insurance policies, and tax filings. Most of it was clean, boringly, brilliantly clean. And then I found it. A single contract. A shell corporation leasing a massive warehouse space in Newark. The contract had a two-way clause, a termination option so vague and oddly worded that it was essentially a trap door. It was a masterpiece of legal ambiguity, but I could not tell which way the trapdoor swung. Was this the back door Los Reyes wanted, or was this Mateo's own emergency exit? This single contract, this one clause, could either be the key to sinking his entire operation, or the key to saving it. I brought it to him that night. Aria was asleep. The house was quiet. We were in the library. A fire crackling in the massive stone hearth. He read the clause I had highlighted. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "This," I said, my professional voice taking over, "this is your vulnerability. This is what the district attorney would use. This implies a non-arm's-length transaction. This implies you are a party to whatever is happening in that warehouse." He was silent for a long time. He tossed the file onto the table between us. "You know why I was afraid to love you." "Elena," he said, his voice quiet, changing the subject so abruptly it gave me whiplash. I was startled. I thought you were afraid to love, period." "No," he said. He looked at the fire. "I was afraid to love you, because in my world, love is not a strength. It is a target. It is leverage. The moment I love something, it becomes my enemy's greatest weapon. I kept you safe by keeping you in the dark. I kept you at a distance so no one could see how much you mattered." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, painful honesty I had never seen before. "And now I have a daughter. I have this small human I would burn the entire world down for. I have given my enemies the perfect weapon, and I gave it to them by loving you." I stared at him. The man of secrets was finally telling the truth. "Well," I said, my own voice shaky, "that makes two of us." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I am afraid too, Mateo," I confessed, the words tasting strange and foreign on my tongue. "I am afraid of you. I am afraid of this house. I am afraid of the drones and the men with guns. But mostly, I am afraid of you." "I will never hurt you, Elena, or her." "I know," I said, the admission tearing at me. "That is the problem. I am afraid of you because you are the only man who has ever made me feel safe. I am afraid because you are making me want to trust you again, and I do not know how to be a compliance lawyer and be in love with you at the same time. I do not know how to live in this gray area." I tapped the contract on the table. "My job is to find the truth. Your world is built on hiding it. I look at this contract, and I see a perfect lie. I analyze my life with you, and I see the same thing. He stood up and walked over to me, did not touch me. He just stood there, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough for me to smell the faint, clean scent of his soap. "Then teach me, Elena," he whispered. "Teach me how to make it the truth." His words lingered in the library for a week. Teach me how to make it the truth. It was a truce. It was a challenge. For 7 days, we were not ex-husband and ex-wife. We were not capo and hostage. We were two lawyers, deep in the trenches of a hostile negotiation. We lived in the library, sometimes until 3 a.m, fueled by coffee and a strange, shared intensity. I tore apart the Newark warehouse contract. I started building a new corporate structure around it, one that was legally sound, a fortress of compliance. We argued over subclauses and liability firewalls. It was the most honest, the most intimate our relationship had ever been. We were a team. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was on the floor, cross-referencing shipping manifests. When Mateo's secure phone rang, I watched his face. He listened, his expression calm, neutral, but I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He was not the cold executive. He was the hunter. He ended the call and looked at me. "Los Reyes," he said. His voice was flat. "What do they want?" "They want to meet. They want to negotiate their access to the network." "It is a trap, Mateo," I said, standing up. "You know it is. They were testing your security with that drone." "Of course it is a trap," he said, as if I'd just pointed out that the sky was blue. "It is an invitation to a fight I was planning to have anyway. They want to meet at the Newark warehouse." My stomach clenched. "The one from the contract." "My ground, Bauer," he said. "They think I am weak. They think the commission is squeezing me. They are right." He walked to the window, looking out into the dark. Secure compound. "I will go. I will take my elite team, 12 men. We will end this. We will cut the head off Los Reyes, and the commission will get a very clear message about what happens when you try to squeeze me." The preparations were immediate. It was cold, military, and efficient. He gathered his team in the high-tech security room, a bunker of monitors and communication equipment. I watched him brief them. I had, in my quiet bad day preparations, studied these protocols. I knew the routes, the call signs, the vehicle assignments. Then I saw him, Lorenzo, Mateo's cousin, with the smile like a razor blade, when he was in the garage, supposedly overseeing the vehicle preparation. I watched him on the high-definition security monitor. He was speaking to 2 of the men assigned to Mateo's personal vehicle. I saw him clap one man on the shoulder. I saw him slip an envelope to the other. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, filled my throat. I went to my own encrypted laptop. I pulled up the official security roster for the Newark trip, the one Mateo had personally approved, 12 men. Then, using an administrative password I had found weeks ago, I accessed the active duty roster, the one that had just been logged for the trip. Lorenzo had changed it. He had reassigned 4 men from the primary tactical team, citing a scheduling conflict. He had sent them to guard a separate property in Queens. He had also reassigned Mateo's 2 most trusted personal guards, the men who would be in his car, and replaced them with the 2 I had just seen him speaking to. Mateo was not walking into that warehouse with 12 men. He was walking in with 6, and the men guarding his back were on Lorenzo's payroll. This was not a negotiation. This was not a trap set by Los Reyes. This was an assassination. Lorenzo was feeding his own cousin to the cartel. With Mateo gone, the commission would be appeased. Los Reyes would get their access, and Lorenzo, the ambitious, smiling snake, would be perfectly positioned to take control of the entire Vitale organization. I looked at the clock on the monitor, 5:30 in the afternoon, and he was scheduled to leave at 7. I had 90 minutes. My mind, the lawyer's mind, clicked into overdrive. Running scenarios, option 1, I do nothing, I stay silent, I honor the family. Mateo drives to Newark and dies. Lorenzo takes over. I and Aria become his property. Or worse, loose ends. That was not an option. Option 2, I tell Mateo, I show him the footage from the garage, the changed rosters. He would believe me. He would cancel the meeting. But what then? Lorenzo would deny everything. The threat from Los Reyes would remain. The commission would still be pressing him. The war would not end. It would just simmer. And Mateo would be forced to fight a battle on yet another front. Against his own blood. It would make him harder, colder, more isolated. Option 3, I call Dana Cross. I give her everything. The warehouse, the time, the names. I tell her Matteo Vitale is meeting the Los Reyes cartel. The FBI raids the meeting. They arrest Los Reyes. They arrest Matteo. They arrest everyone. Matteo goes to prison for the rest of his life. He would see it as the final, unforgivable betrayal. I would be a rat. I walked into the nursery. Aria was asleep in her crib, her small chest rising and falling in the soft light of the baby monitor. I thought of Nona Rosa's question. Do you want a home or do you want peace? I realized in that moment I wanted neither. I wanted justice. And justice in this world was a messy, complicated thing. It was not about winning. It was about harm reduction. It was about finding a way to save the man I was beginning, against all reason, to trust again. But it was also about breaking the cycle. I formulated a new option, option 4, the cross trap. I went back to the library and picked up my encrypted phone. I dialed the number I had memorized. Agent Cross, I said, my voice as cold and steady as I could make it. Elena. She sounded surprised. I was wondering when you would call. You wanted information. I have it, tonight, 7 o'clock. The Vitale warehouse in Newark. The address is already in your files. Who is meeting? Her voice was sharp, professional. The entire leadership of Los Reyes, I said. They are having a major operational meeting, dividing territory. This is your chance. Dana, you can cut the head off the snake. You can make your career. A pause. And Matteo Vitale? Will he be there? I have no information regarding Mr. Vitale's schedule. I said, the lie smooth and practiced. My information is about the cartel. This is a gift. Take it or leave it. How do I know this is not a setup? You do not, I said, but I will give you this. They are using the south loading bay. That is their only entry and exit. Hit them hard and hit them at 7:05. They will all be inside. I hung up the phone before she could ask another question. I had given her the target. I had given her the time. I had given her the entry point. But I had not told her about Lorenzo, and I had not told her about the old freight elevator on the north side of the building, the one I had found in the original architectural plans, the one that was not on any of the new security schematics. Now, I had to save Matteo. I ran to the security room. He was there, putting on a lightweight armor vest under his suit. You cannot go, I said, my voice breathless. Elena, we have discussed this. It is handled. No, I said, grabbing his arm. It is not. It is Lorenzo. He cut your team. I saw the rosters. You are not going with 12 men. You are going with 6. And the men in your car? He paid them off. He's sending you to die. Matteo. He stopped. He did not ask how I knew. He did not doubt me for a second. He just stared at me, his eyes turning to black ice. That ambitious little snake, he whispered. He thinks he can take my chair. So cancel, I begged. Please, stay home. We can deal with him. No, he said, turning back to fasten the vest. If I cancel, I am weak. The commission sees me as afraid. Los Reyes wins. Lorenzo wins. You will die, I screamed. 6 men is enough, ain't kay nasimad reaching for his jacket. No, it is not I. I did something. The words tumbled out. I did something to stop it, to protect you. He froze, his jacket halfway on. What did you do, Elena? I called Dana Cross, I whispered. His entire body went rigid. He turned to face me, and for the first of my life, I saw him look truly murderous. You did what? I told her Los Reyes was at the warehouse, I spoke quickly. my words tripping over each other. I told her they were meeting at 7. I told her to raid the South Loading Bay. I did it to create chaos, to stop the meeting, to save you. He just stared at me. The anger in his eyes did not fade, but it was joined by something else. Calculation, a cold, brilliant strategic light. You told her Los Reyes, at 7 at the South Bay, he repeated, thinking aloud. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. And Lorenzo, he said, is expecting me to be weak, with 6 men, and Los Reyes is expecting me. And now, the FBI is expecting Los Reyes, all at the South Bay. He looked at me, and his smile was genuine. Elena, you did not just save me. You just created the single most perfect trap I have ever seen. What? He looked at his watch. 6:15. They will all be in the wrong place, pointing their guns at the wrong people. This is beautiful. But you are still not going, I insisted. The Federals will be there. Yes, I am, he said. He grabbed my face, his hands hard and calloused, and kissed me. It was not a kiss of love. It was a kiss of adrenaline, of desperation, of a shared conspiracy. It was a promise. I am not going in the South Bay. I'm not even going in the front door. The North Freight elevator, I whispered. His eyes widened in genuine surprise. You did your homework, counselor. He released me. Go to the bunker, take Aria, lock it down. Do not open that door for anyone but me. Do I have your word? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. You promised me dinner, I managed to say, my voice breaking. I always keep my promises. Elena, he said, and then he was gone. I did exactly as he said. I took my sleeping daughter, a bag of her essentials, and my encrypted laptop, and I locked us in the steel-reinforced panic room hidden behind the wine cellar. I had access to the full security feed. I watched. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break. At 6:59, I saw 2 black sport utility vehicles, Mateo's reduced team. They did not go to the South Bay. They glided into the shadows on the north side of the building, disappearing from my view. At 7:02, 3 more vehicles arrived. Los Reyes. They parked brazenly in front of the South Loading Bay. At 7:04, I saw muzzle flashes, bright white sparks on the infrared feed, coming from the warehouse, targeting the Los Reyes cars. Mateo had not waited. He had hunted them. At 7:05, just as I had planned, the world exploded. FBI tactical vans swarmed the entrance. Sirens blaring, lights flashing. They descended on the South Loading Bay. It was absolute chaos. Los Reyes was pinned, caught in a 3-way fight. They were being hit from inside by Mateo's men, and from outside by the federal agents. Lorenzo's compromised guards must have been in the middle, completely confused, their plan shattered. I could not breathe. My hands were shaking. I picked up the secure phone and dialed the one number I had insisted on keeping the private cell of Dr. Ramirez from Boston. Elena, what is wrong? He answered instantly. I need you, I said, my voice shaking. Westchester, now. And I need you to call the private team from New York, the ones who came before. Tell them it is a code red. Tell them to bring blood, AB negative. Elena, with what is happening? Just come, I begged, and hung up. I watched the feed for another 20 minutes. The fighting stopped. The federal agents were in control. They were pulling bodies from the warehouse. They were arresting the survivors. The power map of the East Coast had just been violently redrawn. I heard it before I saw it on the camera, the sound of Mateo's helicopter. It was not waiting for an all clear. It was landing, fast, on the main lawn. The compound doors burst open. Mateo's men, the ones who had survived, carried him in. He was conscious, his face a mask of gray pain. His left arm and shoulder were soaked in blood. They did not take him to the bunker. They took him to the dining room. They laid him on the massive 20-foot polished wood table, the one where Nona Rosa had asked me about peace. I ran to him. The medical team was not here yet, and he was bleeding. He was pale. His eyes found mine. He managed a grim, painful smile. "See?" he rasped, his voice weak. "Home for dinner." The private medical team arrived. My pizza delivery. They swept in, efficient and silent, turning the antique dining room into a field hospital. Dr. Ramirez was with them, his face pale but focused. They cut away Mateo's suit and shirt, a single bullet wound, through the shoulder. It was clean, but it was deep. He had lost a dangerous amount of blood. They worked. I stood in the doorway, holding Aria, who had woken up and was watching the strange lights with wide, curious eyes. The smell of antiseptic and blood filled my home. The snow had started to fall again, melting against the warm glass of the windows. An hour later, it was over. He was stitched, stabilized. He had 2 bags of his own rare blood pumping back into him. He was alive. The team cleared out, leaving us alone in the wrecked dining room. I put Aria back in her bassinet and walked to the table. He was awake. His eyes were clear, though filled with exhaustion. I stood over him, my hands clasped in front of me. I had to say it. "It was me," I whispered. "I called her. I set it all in motion. I called the federal government. I brought them to your warehouse." He just looked at me. "I betrayed you, Mateo," I said, the tears finally coming, hot and silent. He reached up with his good hand, his right hand, and weakly grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "I know," he rasped. I froze. "You know?" "I knew," he said. "The moment you told me about the north elevator," his voice was rough. "You could have given her that, Elena. You could have told her where I would really be. You could have told her about Lorenzo. You could have handed them my entire family, my entire life, on a silver platter. You could have sent me to prison forever." He pulled my hand to his chest, placing it over his heart. It was beating, steady and strong, under my palm. "But you did not," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. "You gave them Los Reyes. You took my worst enemy off the board. You exposed my cousin, and you left me an escape hatch." He closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of pain passing over him. "You did not choose the law, Elena," he said, opening them again. "And you did not choose my world. You chose me. That was not betrayal." He squeezed my hand. That was the most ruthless, brilliant act of loyalty I have ever seen. The dining room table, 20 feet of dark, polished wood, was gleaming again. The scent of antiseptic and blood, which had clung to the air for a time, had been replaced by the sharp, clean smell of lemon oil. Mateo's men, I was learning, were efficient at cleaning up every kind of mess. The room where my ex-husband had nearly bled to death was once again just a room, pristine and silent, waiting for a dinner party that would never come. Mateo was upstairs. He was sleeping. His shoulder was tightly bound, the bullet wound clean, the stitches precise. Dr. Ramirez, bless his civilian heart, had stayed for 6 hours, monitoring his vital signs before finally, reluctantly, accepting a ride back to Boston in one of Mateo's armored cars. Mateo was weak, but he was alive. I had spent the night in a chair beside his bed, Aria sleeping in my arms, just listening to the slow, steady sound of him breathing, my own heart, which felt like it had been trying to beat its way out of my chest for 24 hours, finally settled into a bruised, exhausted rhythm. The fallout from the Newark shootout was immediate and seismic. The news channels were calling it the single largest organized crime bust in a decade, a brilliant, coordinated sting operation by the Federal Bureau Investigation. Agent Dana Cross, her face looking stern and professional on television, was the new hero of federal law enforcement. She had, according to the press, decapitated the Los Reyes cartel in one swift surgical strike. It was a clean narrative. Good had faced evil, and good had won. I watched the report on the small television in Mateo's bedroom, a bitter, ironic smile playing on my lips. The truth was so much messier. The truth was that justice had been a 3-way trap set by a desperate mother in a panic room. The other fallout came through quieter channels, not through the television, but through a single, discreet visit. 2 days after the shootout, Nonna Rosa, Mateo's grandmother, requested my presence in the library. She was dressed in her usual formal black, sipping a small glass of anisette. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "It is done," she said, her voice as dry as old parchment. "What is done, Nonna?" "The peace, the commission," she said, using the formal name for the old guard, "is impressed. They are not happy, but they are impressed. They did not like Los Reyes. They were a virus, too loud, too violent, you and Mateo." She looked at me, her black eyes sharp. "You have done them a favor." "So they are happy with Mateo?" I said. She snapped, setting her glass down with a sharp click. "They are not happy. They are old men. They do not like new methods. They do not like helicopters. They do not like federal agents being invited to a business meeting." Her stare was so intense it felt like a physical weight. "They do not like your methods, Elena." I held her gaze. I would not apologize for saving him. "But," she continued, a small, grim smile touching her lips, "they are, above all, practical men. They have offered a truce, a conditional peace." "What are the conditions?" "Mateo will pull back from the gray areas. The ones that cause this noise, the ones that bring the federal government sniffing at our doors, he will consolidate. He will focus on the legitimate businesses, the logistics, the real estate. He will give up the vulnerable ports." "He will be giving up power." I said. It was a statement of fact. "He will be trading power," Nonna Rosa corrected, her voice like steel. "In exchange, the commission offers something far more valuable. They will sanctify this territory, Westchester, this compound, this family." Sanctify? They declare it sacred ground, off limits, no business, no violence, no vendettas. They are giving their word, the old word, that no harm will come to this house. They are guaranteeing the safety of the child, of your child. She leaned forward, the scent of anise sharp between us. "They are guaranteeing your peace. Elena, the peace I asked you about, they are, I think, a little afraid of you. They do not understand a woman who can command the federal government like an attack dog. They want you and the child to be happy and quiet." I understood. This was not a truce. It was a surrender. They were terrified of the new world, a world where a compliance lawyer with a cell phone was more dangerous than a crew of soldiers. My next meeting was with the other side, Dana Cross. I met her at the same coffee shop in Terrytown. This time, my security detail, 2 new men who looked like they were carved from granite, stayed in the car. Mateo had granted me that small circle of trust. Dana looked tired, but she was glowing with triumph. "Eliana," she said, sliding into the booth, "you did well. The Bureau is very grateful. Los Reyes is finished. We have a dozen of their top lieutenants in custody, and they are all singing, desperate to make a deal." "I'm glad I could help," I said, my voice noncommittal. "It is not over," as she said, leaning in. "We're building a massive case. We do not just want the cartel. We want the entire network, the infrastructure they were trying to use. We want Vitale Holdings." My blood ran cold. "I told you, Donna Erie, I am not your informant against him." "He was there. Elena Wissa, we know he was. We found his blood at the scene. AB negative. It is a rare type. We just cannot prove it was his. We cannot place him inside the warehouse during the shootout. We need you." Here it was, the final, terrible choice, the line. "No," I said. "Elena, think about what you are doing. This is your one chance. You and your daughter. A clean break. Witness protection. A new life. Completely free." "I have a life," I said, my voice hard and clear. "And I will not be the one to destroy the lives of 500 innocent people just so you can get a headline." She looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "The logistics company," I explained, leaning in, my voice low and intense. "Vitale Holdings. It employs over 500 people. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, mechanics, data entry clerks. They are not criminals. They are working-class people. trying to pay their mortgages and feed their families, you seize that company. You destroy their lives. You put 500 families on the street. That is not justice. Dana, that is just collateral damage so you can win a prize. She stared at me, her mind clearly processing this new angle. I will testify, I offered. I will give you a signed, sworn affidavit. I will tell you everything I know about Los Reyes. I will detail how they approached me, how they threatened me with the drone, how they planned the meeting. I will give you enough to put them away for life. But my testimony ends there. I will not discuss Vitale Holdings. I will not discuss Matteo Vitale. I will not place him at the scene. That is my line. Dana was a good lawyer. She knew when she had gotten the best deal she was going to get. She nodded slowly. You are drawing a very dangerous line, Elena. I am a compliance lawyer. Agent Cross, I said, picking up my coffee. Drawing lines is my entire job. You get Los Reyes, that is the deal. When I returned to the compound, the house was quiet. I found Matteo in the library, his arm in a black sling, his other hand moving a mouse across his desk. He was working. Lorenzo, I said, standing in the doorway, what happens to him? Matteo did not look up from the screen. He's gone. Gone where, prison? He finally raised his head. His eyes were cold. The vulnerable man from the dining room table gone. The capo firmly in his place. Prison is a state institution. This was a family matter. My grandmother handled it. The old way. The old way? He is disavowed, Matteo said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. She held a meeting with the family. She excised him. His name is not to be spoken. His assets are frozen. He is in exile. He has no money, no protection, no family, and no name in our world. He looked at me. That is a sentence far worse than any prison. He will spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Justice has been served. I thought of Lorenzo's slick, razor-blade smile. I felt nothing. Matteo kept his word to the commission, and he kept his word to me. The next morning, he called me into the library. The Newark warehouse, and he said, the contract, the back door, shut it down. I was stunned. Shut it down just like that. Terminate the lease. Pay the penalty. We are out. I am handing you the keys, Elena, the real ones. He gestured to the computer. I want you to restructure the entire compliance division. I want you to be the firewall. Build the wall so high and so thick that not even a whisper of the gray world can get in. I want Vitale Holdings to be 100% legitimate, bulletproof. Your word is law. Can you do it? Yes, I said, my voice firm. I can. My personal, encrypted insurance policy was no longer necessary. I was writing the actual policy for the entire company. I was not just drawing lines. I was building the walls myself. Life settled. The quiet I had craved in my tiny Boston apartment, I found in this fortress. But it was no longer a cage. It was a home. The panic faded. The constant, thrumming anxiety that had been my companion for 15 months was replaced by the mundane. Beautiful rhythms of a new baby, the smell of warmed milk, the soft click of the baby monitor at night, the quiet, domestic arguments over who would give Aria her bath. Matteo's shoulder healed. The sling came off. He was strong. One afternoon, about a month after the shootout, I was in the nursery. Aria was 9 months old. She was holding onto the wooden railing of her crib, her small legs wobbling beneath her. She was trying to stand. She pulled herself up, her tiny face tight with concentration, held on for one glorious, unstable second, and then fell back down with a soft thump on her diaper. She did not cry. She just grunted, gripped the bars, and tried again. Matteo walked in, his footsteps silent on the thick rug. He stood beside me, his good shoulder brushing mine. We watched her. She tried again. She pulled herself up, her legs shaking. She stood, she wobbled, and then she let go with one hand, turning to look at us. Her mouth opened in a wide, triumphant, toothless grin. She had done it. It felt like a pact, a silent treaty. Each of her small, unsteady victories was a promise. We were learning to stand, too. We were learning to build a new life, one not based on secrets and fear, new one. That night, after Aria was asleep, we sat in the library. The fire was crackling. It was a comfortable silence, no longer freighted with unspoken words. "We need rules," I said, breaking it. He looked up from his book, a rare expression of amusement in his eyes. "Rules?" "Yes, lawyers like rules, us." "It is new territory. We are not married, we are not just co-parents, we are partners in this strange new company we are building. We need rules of engagement, a new contract." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "All right, counselor, propose your terms." I took a deep breath. Rule 1. The truth comes first. No more secrets to protect me. No more walls. If there is a threat, we face it, together. The truth before the secret. He nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed, Rule 1. Rule 2, I continued. The child before the power, Aria, her safety, her future. It comes before the business, before the commission, before all of it, always." "That is the easiest rule you will ever write," and he said, his voice soft. "Agreed. Rule 2. Rule 3. I paused. This was the hardest one, the one that meant everything. "If you ever have to choose between loving me and controlling me, choose loving me." He closed his book and set it down on the table. He stood up and walked over to me, kneeling in front of my chair so our eyes were level. He took both of my hands in his. His gaze was steady, the gray in his eyes clear and honest. "That is the rule, Elena," he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. "That is the only rule that matters." I looked at our joined hands. I was a compliance lawyer. I knew that justice was not always about punishment. Sometimes, justice was just redefining the terms. It was about canceling the old toxic contract and having the courage to write a new one. And for the first time, I believed this one might actually last. 1 year, it passed like a lifetime and like the blink of an eye. 12 months of firsts. Aria's first word was, predictably, Papa. Her second, and by far her favorite, was no. Maya, my wonderful, pragmatic Maya, assured me this was the standard operating procedure for every American toddler, who quickly learns that no is the single most powerful word in the English language. We were no longer defined by 2 cities. My tiny 5th-floor walk-up in Boston was a distant memory. The Westchester compound, which I had once bitterly called the 5-star hotel of my anxiety, was no longer a fortress. It was simply home. The high stone walls that I once saw as a cage now felt like a boundary, a necessary line between the world and our family. The quiet was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. Boston and New York City were no longer 2 separate, warring territories. They were just 2 stops on the same train line, 2 poles of the same stable life we were building. We were married on a warm Saturday in late September, 1 year after the night in the emergency room. We did not hold it in a cathedral. We held it in the backyard, on the lawn, under the ancient oak tree where I had first spotted the Los Reyes drone. This time, there were no ambassadors. There were no politicians, no judges, no men with cold eyes and gray intentions. The guest list was barely 30 people. Maya was my maid of honor. She wore a ridiculous lilac dress I had picked out, and she cried so hard she ruined her makeup before I even made it down the aisle. She held my hand, squeezing it, her eyes full of a relief so profound it was almost painful. Nonna Rosa sat in the front row, dressed in her customary black lace. She held Aria on her lap. Aria, who was now walking with a determined, unsteady gait, wore a tiny white dress and was far more interested in the old woman's antique pearls than in the ceremony. We did not have a priest. We asked Dr. Ramirez to officiate. He had become a friend, a man bound to us by that shared night of adrenaline, antibiotics, and AB-negative blood. He stood before us. looking profoundly uncomfortable in a suit, and read a small, beautiful blessing. He was not a religious man, but he spoke of new beginnings. He spoke of the families we are born into, and the families we choose to build in defiance of the world. The most surprising acknowledgement came not from a guest, but from a delivery van that arrived an hour before the ceremony. A massive, shockingly beautiful arrangement of white lilies, the same flowers that had filled St. Patrick's Cathedral all those years ago. A small, white card was tucked deep inside the blossoms. It was not signed. It just read, "For the family who finally chose the right path on their last wrong day." Dana Cross. She'd kept her side of the bargain, and in her own way, she was acknowledging that I had kept mine. Mateo's transformation was not just internal. It was not just in the way his eyes softened when he looked at Aria, or the way he now held my hand in the library instead of a contract. It was structural. He had kept his word to the commission, and he had kept his word to me. He had pulled back from the gray, from the vulnerable ports and the shadowy logistics that brought the wrong kind of attention. But he did not just close those doors. He took the men who had been working in those shadows, men who were now unemployed and vulnerable, and he built them a new door. He liquidated 2 of the Newark properties and used the capital to fund the Vitale Vocational Training Center in the Bronx. He was retraining his former employees. He was teaching them computerized freight management, supply chain logistics, and high-level security protocols, all for the legitimate side of the business. He was taking the human capital from his old, dark world and giving them the tools to build a life in the new, light one. It was not a loud press release kind of charity. It was a quiet, sustainable, practical kindness. It was, I realized, his own form of compliance. It was his way of balancing the books. I found my own balance. 2. I remained the chief compliance officer of Vitale Holdings. My walls were high. My firewalls were thick. The company was now as bulletproof as I could legally make it. But I also started teaching, 1 night a week, a part-time seminar at a local law school, business ethics. I stood at the front of that first class, looking at the rows of bright, ambitious young faces, all of them looking at me, just as I had once looked at my own professors. They were all so eager to learn the rules, the loopholes, the ways to win. I thought of the Newark contract, that beautiful, deadly, ambiguous document. The goal of a good lawyer, I told them, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet lecture hall, is not to win an argument. The goal is to prevent one. The best clause, the most perfect piece of legal writing, the one you will spend your entire career trying to craft, is the one you never, ever have to use. The true, final resolution, the last ghost from our old life, arrived not with a siren, but with the mail. It came on a cold Tuesday morning in a plain manila envelope from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Bureau of Vital Statistics. It had been forwarded from my long-closed post office box in Boston. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a new, official, embossed copy of Aria's birth certificate. I had filed the paperwork months ago to formally add Mateo's name, a simple legal procedure to finalize what we both already knew. I looked at the document, Father Mateo Vitale. That was what I expected. But underneath, in the section for amendments and notations, there was a small block of text. It was a legal addendum. I read it, my blood running cold, then hot. It was a court-ordered notation, dated almost 1 year ago, just 2 weeks after Aria's birth. It stated that the name Mateo Vitale had been automatically added to the birth certificate by the state, not based on my recent request, but on a petition filed by St. Agnes Hospital in New York. The petition cited a confirmed genetic match from a mandatory state DNA screen, cross-referenced with prenatal tests I had taken in Boston. I dropped the paper on the table. My hands were shaking. The call. The night Aria was sick. The nurse's voice in my ear. Mr. Vitale, we are St. Agnes Hospital. Your name was just confirmed as the father. I had assumed it was a coincidence. I assumed they had somehow found his name as my emergency contact, or breached my divorce records. But this meant something else entirely. It meant the hospital in Boston, where Aria was born, had followed that new public health mandate I had barely registered. They had submitted her prenatal DNA scan to the state registry. The state had run it, and the system, in its cold, bureaucratic, automated efficiency, had found a match in the New York medical database from Mateo's own records. The phone call that had brought him to Boston, the call that had started this entire, terrifying, beautiful cascade of events, the call that I thought was a 1 in a million chance. It was an administrative error, a bureaucratic mix-up, a piece of automated paperwork, filed by a clerk in a basement office who I would never meet. That single, mundane, clerical error had been the lightning strike. It was not fate. It was a filing mistake. It was the typo that saved our lives. I was still sitting there, staring at the paper, when Mateo came in, pulling off his running gloves. He saw my face and his smile faded. "Elena, what is it? What is wrong?" I could not speak. I just handed him the certificate. He read it, his brow furrowing in confusion. Then he read the addendum. His eyes widened. He looked at me, then back at the paper. Then he started to laugh. It was not a small chuckle. It was a deep, genuine, booming laugh that filled the kitchen. "A filing error," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "A clerk in Boston checked the wrong box." He shook his head, the wonder in his voice profound. All of this, all of it, because of a piece of paperwork. He pulled me out of the chair and into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "I should send flowers to the Boston Vital Records Department," he murmured, his voice thick with laughter. "A case of champagne. Something—" I leaned back, my heart so full I thought it might burst. I looked at this man, my husband, the father of my child, the man I had once run from, the man I now held on to. "I have a better idea," I said, a smile pulling at my own lips. "Send them a scholarship fund for the children of hospital administrators." He kissed me, long and deep. That night, the first snow of the season began to fall. It was quiet, the flakes large and slow, drifting down past the windows of the library. Aria was asleep upstairs, safe in her room, her breathing a soft, steady rhythm over the baby monitor. Mateo stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. We were watching the snow. He was solid. He was warm. He was real. We were both holding steaming mugs of hot cocoa. I used to think happiness was like the snow, something pure, perfect, clean, and untouched. I was wrong. Happiness is not sterile. It is not clean. It is not a perfect, unbroken sheet of white. Happiness is this. It is the complex, messy, beautiful mixture. It is the warmth of the cocoa in my hands. It is the solid strength of the arms around me. It is the faint, silvery scar on his shoulder that aches when the weather turns cold. It is the memory of the fear and the knowledge of the scars we both carry. Happiness is not an absence of problems. It is just the quiet, daily, ruthless decision to choose the right thing. One more time, and then one time after that. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.